Hello everyone and welcome to the second part of this Nemesis info video. In part 1 we address sections 1 to 3 of our mapping survey. And just to remind, our mapping survey aimed to map the situation of the European university hospitals regarding the use of NGS or next generation sequencing technologies. Therefore, in this part, we were talking about the availability of national or regional plans for personalized medicine, the respondents' preferred applications, or the number of samples processed in each center. But additionally, we also included other questions, for example, questions regarding the standardization and interpretation, which are a crucial process as we need a precise diagnosis. Regarding the standardization of the wet and dry lab processes, the survey showed that between 81 to 91% of the wet lab processes are performed in a standardized manner, whereas only 66 to 78% of the dry lab processes, including computational analysis or interpretation processes, are standardized. Therefore, there are differences in the standardization between the wet and the dry lab processes. However, keeping in mind this data, we can conclude that most of laboratories are aware of the importance of standardizing. Regarding the generation of clinical practice guidelines, there is no consensus on which institution should generate them, despite being considered essential by 98% of the researchers or clinicians. 71% of the laboratories use a general international guidelines to standardize and report sequencing variants, such as the American College of Medical Genetics one. And others refers to a national guideline or to a disease-specific guidance. Nonetheless, 90% of the respondents use the ACMG recommended terms for variant classification, for example, pathogenic, lightly pathogenic, uncertain significant, benign. Regarding the composition of the NGS teams, the results show that NGS groups are usually multidisciplinary teams composed of medical and clinical laboratory geneticists, bioinformaticians, basic science researchers, physicians subspecialists, among others. In general, NGS teams usually hold meetings to discuss challenging cases of the filtered variants. And worryingly, in 67% of the groups, filtered variants are never, rarely, or occasionally reviewed by a board-certified ND clinical geneticists. And what is more, in 22% of the laboratories, the reported variants are never confirmed by another methodology. And then we added a data storage and software tool sections, as we wanted to know the bioinformatics performance regarding the storage formats, the programming language, or toolkits applied to different phases of the NGS pipeline. And additionally, we specifically asked that only bioinformaticians answer these questions. And regarding in what format NGS data is stored, 66% of the laboratories use FASTQ as their main storage modality, although BAN and BCL files are used to a similar extent. And most of the laboratories have their own pipelines to process NGS data and store the data in local and in-house databases. In fact, only 20% of them use software commercial clouds to store their data. In 38% of the laboratories, programming is used to read and pre-process and analyze NGS data, whereas 27% of them do not use programming to accomplish NGS processing tasks. And with 25%, not knowing, unsure, or did not answer. Regarding the main programming languages, R is used to pre-process and analyze NGS data in 27% of the laboratories. But I would like to highlight that 35% of the respondents did not know or left this question unanswered. And the laboratory survey used different software tools to tackle NGS data processing. Toolkits are applied mainly to the alignment, data import, and visualization processes. But in general, the gateway information reveals a lack of knowledge regarding bioinformatic issues. Therefore, this section has been especially reinforced when designing the masterclass. And finally, we included a reporting section, as we wanted to know which professional profiles are involved in writing and reviewing the NGS clinical reports. And in 76% of the surveilled laboratories, the initial draft of the NGS clinical report is written by one of these two professional profiles, whereas the professional profile of the reviewer is varied. And the final question was about the main bottlenecks that the researchers and clinicians had to face to bring NGS into medical practice. And although there were a variety of issues responsible for slowing down this process, most of the respondents, 31% of them, claim that the interpretation stage is the most critical bottleneck. Therefore, we can draw the following conclusions from this survey. NGS is considered an essential tool by researchers and clinicians, although not all of them have access to national or regional plans for personalized medicine. European laboratories are generally provided with the required equipment to perform NGS studies. Standardization varies between wet and dry lab processes, and a clinical practice guidance is seen as an essential requirement. And some of the laboratory survey do not perform an adequate confirmation of the reported variants, which are reported via a variety of professional profiles. Bioinformatic processing entails one of the major issues regarding the NGS implementation, and finally, the interpretation stage is reported to be one of the most critical bottlenecks. Thus, we identified several issues and shortcomings at European clinical services. We believe that we obtain a complete overview of the implementation of NGS in the European Union. And you can find this data in this Hemisphere paper, published in March, but the Nemesis Consortium is pleased to answer any question or discuss any doubt or concern you may have at any time. So finally, I would like to thank you again for your time and for your attention. Please follow us on social networks or check out our website for more updates on the Nemesis project. And I hope to see all of you in the next Nemesis info video. And thank you again and goodbye.